think there are Republicans, certainly in the Senate, who fear that this is storing up problems for the future, and America stepping away from its traditional role as the world's policeman, certainly since the Second World War, is actually quite dangerous.
Is Washington gripped then by Keir Starmer's arrival? Have people been waving flags and baking special cakes?
Well, not quite. There was a party last night at the British Embassy where a lot of important people, the great and the good of DC, turned up to welcome him. He just stepped off the plane and arrived and gave a funny and quite warm speech as well. But obviously, today is where the action is. He meets Donald Trump at around lunchtime our time, a bit later, early evening your time. And they're pretty crucial talks. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. Ukraine is obviously top of the list. Keir Starmer's pressing very hard for security guarantees for the Ukrainians, and Donald Trump seems to be less inclined to do that. But there's also trade and whether Britain can present itself as a different trading partner than perhaps the European Union, which Donald Trump has in his crosshairs at the moment. The Chagos Islands, the new proposed Chinese embassy in London, the Americans aren't happy with. So there's plenty on the agenda today.
What does Donald Trump want to get out of it? I mean, what's his aim here with Starmer? Is it all about a state visit for him, or will he be more concerned, as you say, about the Chinese embassy and things like that?
I think there are things that are important to the Americans, the Chinese embassy being one. I think that Donald Trump would love another opportunity, which I'm sure he'll be granted, to come to the UK and meet the royal family and all the pomp and ceremony that brings. But Donald Trump, even though he's on Ukraine, sort of seemingly sort of casting out on his own and doing this deal with Ukraine over minerals, he still needs allies. He wants the Europeans to provide the security guarantees for Ukraine. Keir Starmer will say, look, there has to be an American element, an American role in that, which Donald Trump is not so inclined to do. But Donald Trump doesn't want to be isolated on the world stage. He wants people to say nice things about him. He doesn't want critics. He doesn't want his own party and Americans more generally to say that he's unpopular on the international stage. So having Keir Starmer here today, having Emmanuel Macron in the US, in Washington on Monday, and of course Vladimir Zelensky tomorrow, it shows that people are going to see Trump and is important. I think that's important to him.
I mean, Trump has thus far been relatively nice about Keir Starmer. Elon Musk has said he should be in jail. Any chance of those two men meeting?
We don't know. I mean, we weren't expecting necessarily Elon Musk to be at the cabinet meeting yesterday, Donald Trump's first cabinet meeting, but he was, and he dominated it. He seems to be at every conceivable event that Donald Trump speaks at the moment. So it's quite possible that Elon Musk might be at the meeting today. He has no particular diplomatic role, but Donald Trump seems to rely on him. I think Donald Trump has been kind about Keir Starmer, and I was told not too long ago that Donald Trump didn't really know much about British politics, but once it had been explained to him just how well Keir Starmer had won last year's general election and the majority he'd won, he was really impressed. It was a big win. It was successful, and that I'm told really impressed Donald Trump. So I think they get off to a good start, even though they come from perhaps different ends of the political spectrum. And as I say, I think Britain will try and, or Keir Starmer will try and present Britain as Donald Trump's bridge to Europe.
And do we know, is there going to be sort of a press conference? Because those are the points where dramatic things can often happen.
That's right. That'll take place at about 7 o'clock your time this evening, perhaps a little bit late. And of course, under Donald Trump, a press conference is a very different species to when we had Joe Biden in office. There were very strict rules with Joe Biden. You had if the Brits that was visiting, you had 2 British questions and 2 American questions. It's a bit more of a free-for-all now, where Donald Trump just seems to point at people he likes the look of. So it could be quite good fun at later on this afternoon.
Let's turn to the visit that comes next, which I suppose for some in Washington might be a bigger deal, which is Volodymyr Zelensky arriving tomorrow. Trump and Putin have their sort of semi-bromance going on. What kind of reception is Zelensky likely to get, particularly because of all the sort of the bad feeling there's been over the last couple of weeks?
I think it depends on what goodies Zelensky brings with him to Washington. The mineral deal that seems to be on the brink of being signed would be a real victory for Trump. It would start, I think, the process of ending the war in Ukraine and present the Americans with a financial victory as well. There will also, I think, be a row over what the Americans are prepared to do in terms of security. Volodymyr Zelensky seems to be reluctant to sign the deal, even though he seems to have agreed to the structure of it, because there aren't any US security guarantees, no guarantees that the US will stop Russia from invading Ukraine again in the future. Trump seems to think that that's a European responsibility. He seems to think that the mineral deal, which benefits or will benefit the US financially, is something he can get out, and the expensive and perhaps dangerous task of providing security for Ukraine is a European job.
Well, here's a clip of Trump talking about that minerals deal that they're expected to sign.
The previous administration put us in a very bad position, but we've been able to make a deal where we're going to get our money back, and we're going to get a lot of money in the future because we have taxpayers that shouldn't be footing the bill.
Alistair, putting aside the way that, from what we've been hearing, the minerals might not be there, and if they are, they'll be expensive to get out, and even if they can get them out, they're in parts of Ukraine perhaps controlled by Russia at the moment. The whole concept of America signing a minerals deal with Ukraine for which they're not providing security guarantees, which means that they're going to have a really sort of, if all of this is true, a hugely valuable investment in a place that is under threat that they themselves are not going to defend. That's pretty weird.
That would appear. If you look back at, I don't know, the history of diplomacy or the way diplomacy works, then yes, that is a pretty weird outcome. I think Donald Trump will see it as a very, very good outcome, both for him and for America. He says repeatedly that the Americans have put $350 billion into the Ukrainian war effort. It's nowhere near that much. It's actually, in reality, about $175 billion, still a lot of money. But he sees this deal as a way of compensating the American taxpayer. Of course, taxpayers in Europe, in the UK and elsewhere in Europe have also put up huge amounts of money as well. But Donald Trump seems to think that this deal will benefit America. And I think if he can get away without any sort of American military presence, any American security guarantees, then that's a good thing for Donald Trump and a good thing for America.
Finally, Alistair, what's the sort of tone and temperature been over the last week in response to everything that Trump has been saying about Ukraine, in response to his kind of everything from calling Zelensky a dictator to the mineral deal to the lack of promising security guarantees? Is there any pushback? Is there any Republican pushback, or is everyone just towing the line?
I think publicly there's a lot of lines being towed. One of the junior ministers, if you like, in the Defence Department was up for his confirmation hearing yesterday and just point blank refused to answer the question whether or not Russia had invaded Ukraine in 2022. I mean, it's a sort of ridiculous state of affairs. Privately, a lot of Republicans do fear what the minerals deal, the sort of the walk away from Ukraine, the refusal even to acknowledge that Russia's responsible for the war, really does paint America in a bad light with its allies. I think there are Republicans, certainly in the Senate, who fear that this is storing up problems for the future, and America stepping away from its traditional role as the world's policeman, certainly since the Second World War, is actually quite dangerous and emboldens people like Putin, people like Xi, other dictators and autocrats around the world who feel that they've got license now to do what they want as long as they don't upset Donald Trump. Yeah. Of course, it's obvious. Russia invaded Ukraine 3 years ago. It's ridiculous even to have to assert that, but that seems to be a truth that's becoming increasingly overlooked here.